Again, I want to thank you all for coming to this, our third and last event in this semester's Drs. Owen and Bibi Bernstein lecture series. I want to acknowledge here in the front row Dr. Bibi Bernstein, whose support for our programs has been longstanding and has been phenomenal. And if you think this event today is worth having come out, among your thank yous, please thank Bibi, because her support really helps make our richest events happen. I want to start also with some other thank yous. I want to thank some of our local elected officials and their representatives for being with us today. I want to thank Anthony Lemma, who is here from Assemblyman Weprin's office. As you all know, as some of you know, we might be sitting outside if it weren't for the work of Assemblyman Weprin, who helped us get this roof over our heads. We also have with us Barry Grodenchik, who will be speaking with us in a few minutes. He's our city council member. And of course, as always, I want to thank Queensborough Community College for their support for this center going back 33 years, and for the president, Dr. Call, for all of her help. Thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the instrumental and wonderful members of the Kupferberg Holocaust Center Advisory Board member. If you wouldn't mind just standing quickly so you could all be acknowledged. I think you know most of them. And if not, please come up and introduce yourself and ask them a question. And then of course, all of you, the members and supporters who have been coming here year in, year out. And for anyone new in the audience, we invite you to be a part of our family here. We do many events in every year. We do, especially a highlight of the year in the spring is our Freedom Seder that we have done now for 12 years. That's based on a Haggadah that was created in a DP camp in Munich, which is significant because it's also where this exhibit, the life of the survivor we're acknowledging and celebrating in the exhibit, brought him to Munich for a number of years after the war. And he was in a DP camp, not in Munich, but nearby. There are moments for an institution like ours that are turning points. When the institution comes to see itself in a new way, either representing a new community or representing it in a new way, or changing the way we anticipate representation to happen. So what is it that this institution does? I think this exhibit allows us a moment to reflect and to expand our perspective of what we are here to accomplish. There are a few seminal moments I'd point out as a preface. Obviously, our founding in 1983 was a pivotal moment for us all to be here today. We started having exhibits very soon afterwards, and our exhibits have really been what's made this institution remarkable among many similarly sized and focused institutions. Our carefully researched and curated original exhibitions that usually are up in our space for several months and then travel the country to other institutions that don't create their own museums. Obviously, this new building, as I mentioned, thanks to the Weprins and others who helped us come out of the basement of the library here on campus about 9 years ago. And I count this exhibit opening as another transformative moment in the existence of this center. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you some of the firsts. Number one, this is our first exhibit that has been developed and designed in collaboration with a professional curator who is also, not coincidentally, a member of the faculty here at Queensborough Community College. and you're going to hear from him. He is our speaker today. He is a man with a truly remarkable gift for teaching and understanding and intuiting how to reach people. This is also the first exhibit that has been created in partnership with a team of student and recent graduated interns that were here from the very first moment of starting to sort through which images were best to display, and until the last minute of actually sticking the images to the wall with the scrapers and making sure everything was straight. And we have some of those students here today, and you'll get to meet them. This is also one of our first exhibits that's based on an authentic artifact from the Holocaust or from one of the genocides we have covered. But in this case, the Holocaust, where this entire exhibit happened because we received into our archive the jacket of a Holocaust survivor. And that's the center point of this exhibit. So it's one of our first that's centered around a real tangible object that's in our collection, and that students at this institution and anyone who visits forever will have a chance to look at, maybe to touch through some gloves, but to see an authentic piece of history that will not, now that it's being properly preserved and maintained, that will not disappear, that will persevere in the way that the Holocaust survivors have persevered for so many years and been our most important educators for 70 plus years. But perhaps more important than all of these reasons, this exhibit is significant because it demonstrates all the potential strengths of regional Holocaust centers like us, and strengths and ways in which they can excel that national Holocaust centers cannot achieve. And that emerges from the fact that this exhibit was built in collaboration with an authentic community to whom these artifacts and these stories truly belong. Let me tell you what I mean. The jacket from Dachau that's at the centerpiece of this exhibit was donated to the KHC 15 months ago by a young woman from Nassau County who found this jacket at an estate sale. She's a native New Yorker, I'm pretty sure. I'll look for a head shake. She also lost her own brother on September 11th. Her grandfather had served as a forced soldier in the Red Army, a Ukrainian Jew. And her life, as hopefully you'll get to hear later, was changed by finding this jacket. It was enriched further by donations of materials, including documents, photographs, and family films by the children of this Holocaust survivor who still live in the area. In fact, who still lived quite close to the home where this survivor had lived and where the jacket was found. It was researched by a young graduate student in Manhattan and a recent college graduate from Minnesota by way of Los Angeles. It was organized and arranged by a Queensborough Community College professor along with a team of students and recent graduates. And it remains here in this community for a 9-month showing where all the stakeholders can continue to visit the exhibit and help expand the impact of the exhibit with the local community and help all of us better understand the meanings that this exhibit continues to generate. In a moment, I'll invite up Dr. Cary Lane, the QCC Assistant Professor of English, and this year's Kupferberg Holocaust Center Curator in Residence, who led the team that put this exhibit together. But first, let me say a deep and abiding thank you to all of you, members of our community, who have supported us in multiple ways, financial, through attending our events, and through inviting others to join our community. The KHC is in a position to take the next evolutionary step because of all the hard work over the past 33 years that have brought us to where we are now. As the survivors who have guided the Holocaust Memorial Education and Action community for the past 70 plus years are becoming less able to drive our work, it is up to us to recommit ourselves to ensuring that their struggle and their perseverance has a voice far into the future. As we approach the 78th anniversary of Kristallnacht, let us open our ears and our hearts to the story of Ben Perez, born Ben Sion Perezetsky, whose life we acknowledge and celebrate with our new exhibit, The Jacket from Dachau, One Survivor's Search for Justice, Identity, and Home. And before I invite Cary up, please allow me to bring Barry Grodenchik, our city council member. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. Isn't he wonderful? I think he deserves a round of applause. We're very lucky to have him here in our community and to do the work that he does. I came here today, as I like to do for all the openings of all the exhibits they have here, and I told Dan that this is the most magnificent exhibit that you've had, and I felt as if I had really stepped into a museum today. It is of a quality that you would see at any, whether it would be a Holocaust-related museum or any museum in this city or anywhere in the world that deals with scholarly works. The two things that struck me today, I've been to Dachau. I visited Germany in 1985. And when I got to the train station at Dachau, I thought to myself, I was 25 years old, I thought to myself, how could there still be a town named Dachau to live in such infamy? And the people that live in that town have to say they're from Dachau. You would have thought maybe they would have changed their name, but they didn't. And it struck me odd, and it was a cold, windy, early May day in Bavaria. And I felt that cold blowing across. Most of the camp isn't there anymore, but a good section of it still exists. And I've been to two camps in my life. One in the Netherlands was a transit camp, and Dachau, which is one of the more infamous places where the Nazis did their particular horrors. I was also struck by the exhibit here. One of my dear, dear friends in the world, Mr. Simon Pellman, those who know him call him Shimmy, he was born in Landsberg, Germany, in the DP camp in 1946. And I couldn't believe that I saw a picture. I just called him. I sent him a picture. He has done very well in this country. His family has been here since the late 40s, and he runs an organization called Tamchei Shabbos. So we're all connected, and they feed, make Shabbos wonderful for almost 400 families a week here in Queens, each and every week. And I asked him how he got to be president of Tamchei Shabbos once, and he said, I didn't go to the meeting. And that's a true story. So if you belong to an organization, you need to show up. I am very happy to support the work of the Kupferberg Center. If we're not going to support it, and I mentioned it to Mr. Perez's son, I strongly feel that each and every one of us who are alive today are Holocaust survivors. My father's family, my mother's family, they were all killed. If they were in Europe, they were killed, except for the people that were in England. My mother used to tell me after the war that she went with her mother, a blessed memory, they're both a blessed memory now, to look at the lists, and they never found anybody that was alive. And it's painful. But the work of this center is not only important, it goes beyond importance, it's critical. It's critical when we look around the world today and we see the horrors of ISIS, and we see the horrors in the Sudan, and in other places, too many places to mention, where we see basic human liberties that people cannot take for granted. They're killed for thinking in a different way, for exercising their basic rights as human beings. This place is important because it speaks to knowledge and it speaks to truth. And it remembers. Zichor Gedank, we must remember. And in the end, that knowledge and that truth is all that we have to stand against the barbarism of today. So by being here today, just by being here today, to listen to this wonderful speaker that you're going to hear, to tour, and maybe to bring your friends or encourage them to do that. I'm going to continue to support this as long as I'm in the City Council. You have my word on that. And I will urge my colleagues to do that as well. But by being here today, you are bearing witness and you are sealing that knowledge and that truth so that, as we say, never again. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Just one of the most sincere city council member or elected officials I have ever had the pleasure of hearing speak.
I wish my mother and father would get to hear this. My mother would have liked it, my father wouldn't have believed it.
So I want to mention, apropos of that, before I bring Dr. Lane up here, just one more thing. One of our own advisory board members was also born in Landsberg Displaced Persons Camp. He is now the president of our advisory board, David Wadowski. He's here with us today. And he's featured, his father was interned at the same concentration camp as the survivor from this exhibit, a subcamp of Dachau called Kaufring. And since we didn't have this survivor with us anymore, David's father, Sam Wadowski, spoke, and he's featured on one of the screens in the exhibit. And so when you get to the screen, that's David's father. So at this point...
One important announcement.
Okay, we have an announcement.
Omitting the most important fact. You and Marissa are responsible for all of this. When that woman gave her old coat to Marissa, not her old coat, the old coat.
George, who should behave yourself just once?
I think George is just trying to insist that we acknowledge Marissa Berman, the assistant director, and me, it goes without saying, and you've already applauded, and our other staff who aren't here with us today, they have other jobs. Yes, thank you. But there's been so much preface. I hope you have something left to join me in welcoming today's real speaker, Dr. Cary Lane. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And I'm glad it's such a nice day for everybody to come and visit. Okay. Yes, this was a team effort. There's no doubt about it. Thank you, George, for pointing that out. And it starts with the director, Dr. Dan Lesham, who's really elevated the center, not just into a regional resource, but taking this national and international with several initiatives. So it was a real pleasure to be part of this initiative to elevate the center into more of a global presence. Of course, Marissa Hollywood. Marissa's over here on the side. She just got applauded. She was there. She's been there since I started working here 6 years ago. I've used the Holocaust Center in my teaching, and many of the survivors here recognize me from the class. But Marissa has always been there for me in terms of both helping with pedagogy and in terms of thinking of the center in larger terms. So she's a wonderful administrator and very talented. And of course, I want to point out that, yes, another. I also want to point out, and we have 2 student interns, or actually 3, who are here today, who I really relied on in this process. I realized early on that this was going to be a significant initiative, okay, and that I needed help. And so we had, at any given time, 5 or 6 student interns and volunteers that were working with me side by side, who I started to rely upon in terms of their thoughts on decisions we were making, or advice, or sometimes support in terms of, because this was an immense amount of work. And I'd like to quickly introduce them to you. The first is Daniel Nussdorf, who's behind the panel. He's still working. Alejandro Leal Pulido, who's in the back here. And one of the things, and I'll discuss it when I go through the images, I took pictures to document the process of curation, to give everybody an idea of what went into this exhibit and the literally thousands of decisions that need to be made. How big, how small, what color, what should we feature, how should we feature it, what should we eliminate? Okay, it's always hard to eliminate things that you've written or decided upon, but for the betterment of the exhibit, sometimes we needed to cut. And I guess the same is part of the writing process, right? It's always hardest to edit and cut what you've written, but the student interns were there for me every step of the way, and And I have some pictures of that, which I'll show later. So this is an extraordinary story, and an extremely meaningful experience for me as a curator and an educator. Perhaps the most meaningful experience that I've had in 20 years of teaching. And the jacket was donated to us. And at first, when Dan asked me to be the curator in residence and to lead the curation effort here, I thought that featuring the jacket itself would be sufficient because it's so powerful and so symbolically strong. But what we found was, as we looked through the artifacts that the Perez family left us, and there were hundreds, is that these other themes and narratives started to gain strength. And so it wasn't just about the jacket, it became about perseverance and a tenacious search for justice from the survivor and his family. And how courageous they were in reestablishing their identity after being persecuted, imprisoned, removed from their homeland, taken to Dachau, 1,000 miles away, in Stutthof, taken to a displaced persons camp, immigration to the United States, re-educating themselves, being underemployed, not to mention the suffering at the hands of the Nazis, the beatings. So what we have here is an incredible story of perseverance, a touching one. And so to me, this is a story of strength. And I think when you walk through the galleries, you feel that as we show documents of Ben Perez and his mother's tenacious search for justice in their reparations effort, a 20-year reparations effort, where they had to document their suffering meticulously, which in essence is like a re-persecution of the war. But they did it anyway. And they succeeded. And they raised 2 children who are here today, and who we will talk to later. So to me, it goes beyond the jacket. It's a story of perseverance. And what I want to do is, I don't want to speak for too long. I want to take you through the story itself, and then for maybe 15 minutes. And then for about 15 minutes, I want to show you the curatorial process. And I took little candid photos as we were painting the walls and deciding on how we were going to display the jacket, and I want to show you all of those. And then what I'd like to do is take a break where we can get refreshments, and we can walk through the gallery for about 20 minutes, and then I'd like to come back and have a discussion with you, and a questions and answers, so we can discuss what we're feeling and what we're seeing. Can we go to the PowerPoint, please, Daniel? So at one point over the summer, I started noticing that I was started getting a reputation for being a perfectionist. And that, they'll say like, oh, the prints came back, Cary won't like them. Or I would identify things that we needed in the hallway and I would ask for them, and even though they weren't part of our budget. And so I think part of I wanted to do it well. And I think that's what that was. And then I wasn't mean about it. It was just this sense that we had to tell this story well of the Perez family, the Perezetskis. And I think everybody began to realize that this story was starting to gain steam as we were going through the summer, and opening was coming, and that we took great care in making sure that our facts and our design did the story justice. So I just wanted to say that. On July 4th, 2015, just over a year ago, a young woman by the name of Jillian Eisman went to an estate sale at this home at 920 Sims Court, North Belmore, which is about 20 minutes from here on Long Island. A ranch house in North Belmore. They were having an estate sale that day. It was the nation's birthday. Jillian Eisman is an antique and vintage clothes collector and enthusiast. And it was a July 4th estate sale, and she likes going to estate sales. She didn't feel like she wanted to go that day. But her husband says, oh, no, come on, we'll stop by. We'll stop by the estate sale. So she goes, okay. So Jillian's husband parked the car in front of this house, and Jillian walked in. And she went straight to the upstairs bedroom, where there's racks of clothing there, where she was looking for vintage dresses. And out of the corner of her eye, she noticed gray, beige, and blue stripes. And as Dan told you, her grandfather served during World War II. She's Jewish. And out of the corner of her eye, these stripes stopped her in her tracks. She knew exactly what she had seen. It was a concentration camp uniform. She had already put a couple of dresses on her arm. She pulled the jacket, put that on her arm, went downstairs, paid $10 for the 3 garments, went to her husband in the truck with a cold look on her face. Her husband said, "What's the matter?" And she told her husband, "I think I just bought a concentration camp uniform." Next slide, please. She showed her husband by putting it in the trunk of her car and taking a quick picture with it. And this is the exact picture she took 5 minutes after she purchased it. As luck would have it, Ms. Eisman went to high school with Marissa Hollywood, our assistant director here at the Kupferberg Holocaust Center. And she said, "Marissa, I think I just found a concentration camp uniform." And Jillian does a lot of research for her job, and she was able to find that the number on the jacket corresponded with a Benzion Perzetsky. And or was it Ben Perez? There was a name listing on the house of Ben Perez, but in the database of Holocaust victims and survivors, it was Benzion Perzetsky. Ben Perez, Benzion Perzetsky. It was him. She brought the garment to the Holocaust Center. She met with Marissa, a reunion of sorts, and she decided to donate the jacket to us. And so we've been working diligently since her donation to tell this incredible story. It's very rare we can find a story from beginning to end like this with all the artifacts. And of course, the Perez family, whom Dan and I visited over the summer, were so gracious in giving the artifacts and films and thousands of photographs that the family had taken over the years, and also donated, which you see all over the exhibit as well. Okay, let's switch to the PDF, please, Daniel. So I'll quickly take you through the story of the Perzetskis, their story of the Holocaust. I think I have an advancer here. The Perzetsky family was from Radviliškis, Lithuania, in northwest Lithuania, a town of 20,000 people, with about 300 Jewish families. That equals about 8% of the population of Radviliškis, Lithuania, before the war. The Jews in Radviliškis were part of the community. They were politically active. Some went to local schools, others went to Jewish schools where they spoke Yiddish. The Perzetskis were store owners, like many of the Jews in the town. They had a wine store, a photo store, and a delicatessen. So they owned 3 stores, and each of them was named the Perzetskis wine store, the Perzetskis photo store, and the Perzetskis delicatessen. Benzion Perzetsky's father died at age 42 in 1937 of a bleeding ulcer for natural causes. So it was a fairly happy and thriving Jewish family in Lithuania who were embedded in the community. In July of 1941, when the Nazis invaded Lithuania, Benzion Perzetsky's brother fell victim to one of the killing squads. So Ben's brother did not survive. the townspeople in Raveliskis, the Jews that were, any Jewish man aged 16 or over was summoned to report in front of the police station on July 11th. Ben Zion Perzetsky's brother, Levi Yichak, was 17, and Ben Zion Perzetsky himself was 15 and a half. So when you think about luck playing a factor in survival, Ben Zion Perzetsky missed the cutoff by 6 months in terms of who was killed and who was not that day. His brother was not so fortunate. There's a monument near the Jewish cemetery in Raveliskis where the killing happened. And there were 300 Jewish men killed that day, and Ben Zion Perzetsky's brother was one of them. And so there's a monument there. I'll get into the reparations effort a little bit. In this letter, Hannah Perzetsky, Ben's mother, during the reparations effort, was forced to document and find witness to her son's killing. The German government after the war said, okay, well, if you want reparations, you have to prove that your son was killed. And here she writes a very impassioned letter, handwritten, and I think, again, showing a resilience and strength in the face of a very difficult task to prove that your son was killed when everybody who was present at the killing was also killed. And this is what she says in this letter. I'm sorry I cannot document my son's killing because anyone present at the killing was also shot to death. And so perhaps like this document in the gallery, which you'll see, and we put it behind glass. When you read it, it's quite powerful. One of the more powerful artifacts in the exhibit. The surviving Jews of Raveliskis, Lithuania, were sent to 2 concentration camps, Šiauliai and Žagarė. The Jews who were sent to Žagarė were all killed. The Jews who were sent to Šiauliai, including Ben and his mother, were then sent to other concentration camps, those who had survived. So Ben and his mother spent 3 years at Šiauliai concentration camp before they went to Stutthof and Kaufering. Ghetto, Šiauliai ghetto. So they were sent for 3 years to the ghetto, Šiauliai ghetto, before they were sent to concentration camp. Again, dodging another bullet. Here are images of Šiauliai ghetto, 1942, 1943. One of the things we wanted to have in the exhibit was a large map to orient people, and I think it's very visually helpful in terms of seeing how far the Perzhetskis were sent. They were from Raveliskis to Šiauliai. The mother went to Stutthof, and she went to one ghetto quickly before then. And then Ben Zion Perzetsky himself was sent about 1,000 miles to Dachau, a munitions factory where he worked building bullets and bombs for the Nazi army. One of the things that struck us was, in researching this, is how hard hit Lithuania was during the war. And there are complex reasons for this, and we have a Lithuanian scholar who discusses, but the idea that Ben and his mother, when 9 out of 10 Jews were killed in Lithuania, as the final toll, approximately, the fact that Ben and his mother both survived. I'm not a statistician, I was never great in math, but that's 9 times 9. That's about a 1 in 100 chance that 2 members of the same family would survive, 1 in 100, in Lithuania. And in fact, if you read the New York Times article several months ago, it was talking about Vilnius. The author of that New York Times article called Vilnius the epicenter of the Holocaust. So one of the things that we do cover is the reasons why Lithuania was so hard hit, and which only makes the story of survival more special and miraculous. He was sent to Kaufering. He was issued a jacket. These were his barracks, or not exactly, but these were what the barracks looked like. In Kaufering, the barracks were subterranean to protect from bombing to Allied bombing. They were camouflaged on the top. They helped protect against fire in case there was a munitions fire. It would stay underground. So his working conditions of building bombs, missiles, the V-2 rocket, flak, cement, these were all, he was underground, forced labor while he was there from 1944 to 1945. And if you see some of the documents, and he writes about consistent beatings by the Nazis, some very severe. Ben Zion Perzetsky was 5'4" tall. He was a short man, but he was stocky and strong. And I think that's another reason why he ended up surviving, and they've sent him to Kaufering, was because he was useful in, I think, in terms of work. At 18, 19 years old, 5'4", stocky build, whoever was deciding at that time said, we can use him on the assembly lines. In the gallery, we wanted to show what other uniforms looked like during the Holocaust. Hanne Liebman, who volunteers here and who I've worked with for many years, she wanted to make sure, hey, Cary, make sure you say in the gallery that there were 40,000 concentration camps during the Holocaust. And we had already done that. Hanne, no problem. We said there are 40,000 concentration camp uniforms. We wanted to show a sample of what some of those look like. Most of the concentration camps were so small they didn't have standardized uniforms, but Ben Zion Perzetsky's jacket was actually manufactured at Dachau, which is why the Dachau concentration camp uniforms and the Kaufering concentration camp uniforms look so similar, because Dachau was actually one of the production centers for uniforms in that area. The American Army liberated Kaufering in April of 1945. Here they made the remaining commandant, Eichelsdorfer was his name, stand amongst the corpses. He was tried and hanged nearby Landsberg a year later. Pictures of liberation, which you'll see in the gallery. And so after liberation, they were sent a few miles away to the Landsberg displaced persons camp and spent 5 years there. 5 years regaining their strength. And you have to remember that Ben didn't have a high school education. He was removed from his home when he was 15 and a half. So he got his graduate equivalency diploma through ORT and some training through ORT at Landsberg. They prepared for immigration. They had an uncle, Izzy Dubler, in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, who sponsored them and says, yes, if they come to the United States, they can live with me. Here's the ORT training. Here's some of their documents. If you notice in the gallery, we enlarged Ben's picture on the upper right corner from his student ID. That student ID picture is literally 1 inch high and ½ an inch wide. But we blew it to 7 feet high. And that's as you enter the gallery. You'd be shocked to see how small that little picture is, but the little picture's in the gallery too, if you can find it. But we enlarged it to 7 feet high. And that's what you see as you enter the gallery. So it was a time to rest and recover and get their life back for Ben and his mother. And they were reunited because Shannon Perzetsky was in Stutthof. She came down to Landsberg, and there was a reunion. So a lot of the pictures you'll see from Landsberg is the two of them hugging, embracing, recovering. And they're smiling. And that's one thing you'll notice about Ben Perez is he's always smiling. And this is that strength and perseverance I was discussing, considering what he had gone through. And the fact that he sheltered all this trauma and suffering from his children. I mean, it's an immense amount of strength. But he's always smiling in his pictures, and you'll notice this. Here's his GED diploma on the right. He even had the strength to revisit his Kaufering concentration camp from Landsberg, which is only a few miles away. So he and his buddies decided to ham it up for the cameras at their former prison. So they came to the United States in 1950. The irony is that the United States, in its Displaced Persons Act, had some discriminatory language in it in terms of how many Jews could immigrate to the United States. And we wanted to put this in the gallery too. The irony that the United States Army, who liberated Kaufering and Dachau and liberated Benzai and Perzetsky, also had fairly discriminatory laws on its books in terms of how many Jews would be accepted into the United States. Once here, Ben was set up on a date and married a pretty and patient and lovely woman, a nurse. They lived in several apartments in Manhattan and the Bronx, including Riverdale. They had 2 children who are here today with us, and we will meet later. And Ben really never, and we'll hear from them, but he never really shared the extent of his suffering. And he did seek treatment after the war. He had survived beatings from Nazis. He was having nightmares and headaches and anxiety, as you would expect. But I think the idea that he would actually seek treatment for it, and not only that, try and get restitution payment or reparations payment for his suffering, both physical and emotional, is testament to his strength. And here are some of the receipts from the reparations payments 20 years after this initiative started. And with this money, and it equaled, we did some calculations with Deutschmarks to US dollars in 1968. It was about $15,000, $20,000. It was enough to put a down payment on the house in Belmore where Gillian Eisman found the jacket. So think about it. Ben kept his jacket for 5 years in the displaced persons camp. He brought it with him to the United States. He brought it to Uncle Izzy's house. He brought it to Manhattan and the Bronx and Riverdale. And he kept it with him, you know. And we can discuss why you think he kept it. I'm pretty comfortable with understanding the arc of this story of why he kept it. But we'll discuss that after we visit the gallery. But and there it sat in his closet. He never showed his children, shielding them from the suffering that he encountered, which is very brave of him, I think. So here is the house in 1968. I showed you a picture from 2015. Here's the house in 1968, and there's Shiana Perzetsky, Ben's mom, on the upper left here, and the kids on the right side, with the garage door open. Ben and Ben's children were bar and bat mitzvahed, and tragically, Ben died at quite an early age, at age 52 in 1978, and he suffered a stroke during his daughter's bat mitzvah ceremony. But I like to look at it as he lived long enough to see both his son and daughter bar and bat mitzvahed, and that's the way I sort of look at it. He was there. He was there that day. So, and the jacket sat in that closet in the upstairs bedroom since 1978, untouched, until Jillian bought it at that garage sale, or estate sale rather, last year, July 4th. I want to quickly show you some images for how that's the basics of the story. There's more detail in the gallery. I just want to show some pictures of the decisions we made and why we made them in terms of how the exhibit looks the way it does. Can we switch to the PowerPoint, please? By the way, while Daniel's getting it up, Caitlin Cicciarello's here. She was one of our all-star student interns. Come on over. Let us see. Yeah, come all the way up. Okay. Give me a hug. Okay. Thank you for coming. When you see the pictures of the amount of artifacts we had to sift through in order to clearly tell this story, I think you'll have a better understanding of the difficult decisions we had to make in terms of, we're going to switch to the PowerPoint. Yep. Hit a F5 on the keyboard. Okay, a quick look at the curatorial process. So Dan and I visited Lori Zullo home, where she had a several cases worth or crates worth of artifacts for us, pictures, documents, Ben Perez's camera, which I think to me was maybe the most intimate artifact that, we all handled the jacket carefully, but to me, holding Ben Perez's camera, both his Super 8 camera, where you'll see all the pictures he took, documenting his family's, how his family thrived. And I think that's one of the reasons Ben took so many pictures, because he wanted to show his family thriving. So they went to Florida and they went on vacations, and Ben was always taking pictures. And so in the gallery, we wanted to put his actual cameras and his photographs on the wall, because I think it made Ben happy to take pictures of his family. Triumphant, really. So Lori shared with us generously her family's documents to help better paint a picture of this story. So here's Lori with all of her family albums, and Dan and I, we visited her during the summer, and we were just overwhelmed that we had these wonderful images and artifacts that could help tell this story properly. Of course, when you have a lot of artifacts, that means you have to decide what goes in the exhibition and what doesn't. So here the student interns are using 1968 technology to look through slides and Super 8 films that Ben had taken throughout his life. And those of you who are a certain age can remember holding up a slide to the light. And, to these interns who are all 25 years of age and younger, this is a very new experience to them. And perhaps at age 46 myself, I don't think I've ever felt as old. Looking at these millennials look at slides, but we're looking for images that help tell the story of Ben and his survival. I involved the students in the interview process. I think it was a good experience for them to think of questions, to think on their feet, and with follow-up questions, to annotate and organize the information we received from here. Abigail Haye and I are interviewing Jillian Eisman, the woman who found the jacket. Here's David Wadowski with his father, Sam Wadowski, who survived capturing at the same time that Ben was there. And Phil Roncaroni, who's in the back, and Nick Cacchese, the wonderful filmmakers who were there with us every step of the way. Yes. Who was there every step of the way. What? Yes, and Leo, our photographer, who actually took the images of the jacket. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, who did a wonderful job in the front of the catalog. And actually, the day that we shot, and actually I have images of that right now. Actually, we did a lot of research. We researched the jacket itself and what the different jackets looked like during the Holocaust. So this was a painstaking process that there was about a team of eight of us, Dan and I, Marissa, and 6 or 7 interns and volunteers, working tirelessly throughout the summer. There was no summer vacation for us. As you can see, Caitlin on the right, exasperated with the amount of work she has to do. And Daniel giving her words of wisdom. Handling the jacket is a very powerful thing, and I can only imagine discovering it, but just handling it was powerful. And so the students themselves helped with the cover shoot. And we wanted to recreate the closet that Jillian found the jacket in, so we needed extra jackets. So this very jacket is actually on the catalog. I cleared out my closet to bring to the photo shoot, so those are all my sport coats next to Ben's jacket there. There's Leo doing his thing. So that's actually maybe 2 seconds before the cover of the catalog was shot. Yeah. How do you display a jacket from Dachau? You know, you don't want to glamorize it, but you don't want to understate it either. So we had long meetings about should there be a pedestal, how much glass, how high, how low. Should there be a ceiling of glass? Should the ceiling of glass be tinted or not tinted? What kind of light should we have on it? So here, the students and I are figuring out what height we should display this jacket, this artifact, this incredibly rare artifact. How should it be displayed? Alejandro was very key in finding a vendor that would encase it in a way that honored it and rather than glamorized it. We always use white gloves when we handled it. So we sent this mock-up to our vendor, and the vendor emailed me. He goes, "Cary, I have to tell you, this was the most detailed mock-up I've ever seen of any order we've ever had." Gaylord Archival is a major archival institution, they put documents in glass, and they're out of Syracuse, New York. But he complimented us on the accuracy and the detail of our mock-up. And again, we wanted to do this well, and we didn't leave any room for error or mistake. So we created a digital mock-up of it. Where was it going to go in the gallery? We decided to put it in the deepest part of the gallery. This is a very tricky room. It's a hallway, and it's a beautiful space here. But we have a three-dimensional object in a fairly narrow hallway, so we decided to put it in the deepest part of the hallway, which also happens to be at the center of the hallway, so that right around the time the Holocaust was happening on our timeline, that's where the jacket is. Well, we had a problem, though, because we had this very sort of unsightly door behind it. And one of the things I was most insistent on, that this jacket not be put in front of this door. We have to cover the door. I kept saying all summer, what are we going to do? Let's put up some drywall. We had to get permission. It was a very painstaking process, but in the end, we did, here's a mock-up of, to get permission to put up the door, we created a mock-up. So here's it with the door, and here, there we go. So we covered the door up, and we put one of our interns, comes from the English department, and she wrote a poem about the jacket, and we decided that this poem would be the perfect thing to put on the wall behind the jacket. That sort of speaks to the essence of what is going on here and the themes of resilience and perseverance and strength. We came up with a color motif. So if you notice in the catalog, on our website, on the walls, you will not see any other color besides gray, rust, and blue. And so we painted the walls for the first time ever here at the Holocaust Center, which is a very bold thing to do if you've never painted the walls for an exhibit. But I think when you're walking through the halls, you can almost never imagine that these colors could be anything else. They fit so well. So we picked up the blue of the stripe of the jacket and made that the timeline, and the gray of the jacket, and made that the bulk of the wall. And we put a rust color that sort of hints at the threads in the collar of the jacket, but also speaks to the fact that it's an antiquity of sorts. There's also stains on the jacket, which are rust in nature, which you'll see when we go in the gallery. So I'm almost done. We painted the hallway, which is not a small thing. It's 100 feet long, that main wall. And we installed the weekend of Rosh Hashanah, and it was all hands on deck. And we were here early, and we were here late, and we included volunteers from the Holocaust Center. Here's Barbara and Linda. There's Daniel conducting the orchestra on the left with his white gloves. There's the enlargement of the 1-inch photograph, which greets you at the beginning of the exhibit. Honey Liebman, one of our survivors here at the Holocaust Center, was an invaluable part of our team. Here she's helping install an 11-foot map on the wall. One of the choices was, well, what font is going to be all this text on the wall? And there happened to be a Polish designer with a fairly new font. This font is 5 years old. It's called Lato. And we felt that it reflected, it was clear to read. It was sans serif for those of you who are design-minded. But it had a certain essence that we think captured the tone well. Readable, but yet had a flair that was not over the top, but it was not too subdued either. And pulling that vinyl is a very meticulous process. It's also a very expensive process. So the little letters on the wall you see, they were meticulously done by our team. I mentioned the camera. So we took Ben, the Perez family's family films. We took it to a lab that's one of the few in the United States that specializes in converting old Super 8 films to digital. And we converted all of his films and all of his photographs so that we could display them. I think this might be my favorite part of the exhibit. I mentioned holding his camera as like it sort of pulsed through me. You know, when you hold someone's camera, it's like its weight, the metal of it. It was just so intimate. I really like this best. And this picture of Ben holding the very camera that's in the display case, I think, I don't know, I think it's Ben at his most triumphant. Take a look when you go in the gallery. It also has the Super 8 reels with his old addresses from the Bronx and Manhattan. We wanted to recreate the Belmore home where the jacket was found. Lori Zullo, Ben's daughter, sent me some pictures of the old house. And of course, it had this paneling, by today's standards, you'd say it's sort of ugly, but it's charming, you know. There was a charming, it was period, you know, 1960s. So we recreated the wall of their Belmore home. We ordered vintage wallpaper. That is actual wallpaper from mid-1960s that we had to order from Belgium and ship here to recreate the family home. And we wanted to put the pictures on the wall. So the family photos and films are on the wall. So it recreates the notion and thought and theme of home. And does it digitally. And we always considered, you know, I'm a pedagogue, I'm an educator, and this center is at a community college, and so considering the students, the 17,000 students who attend this college, we wanted to keep the students in mind when we were curating this. And so we built in a reflection and writing area at the end of the exhibit where we put writing prompts and reflection prompts. Why do you think Ben kept his jacket for so long? How does home change when you're forcibly removed from your home country? Do you think Ben ever found home again? Do you think, how did his identity change, knowing that Ben spoke 5 languages and lived in 7 different countries or military jurisdictions over the course of 10 years? You know, so reflect on this a little bit. And the students that have come in have unanimously enjoyed the exhibit and have learned a lot. And as the survivors here know that more and more the students don't know much about the Holocaust. And I think an exhibit like this can really help them. So visit the writing and reflection area when we go into the gallery. And here's an image from, we had an opening reception for students, and I just love this picture of the students both reading the catalog in front of the beginning of the exhibit and the different cultures that are represented here at Queensborough, learning about Ben's story and his family's story of perseverance. Eva Fogelman is a psychologist who's in one of the films, and one of my students was interviewing her for her own project. Abigail Haije, one of our student interns this summer. So the interns now become docents. then you'll see them in the hallway and you should greet them, but they're experts on the content in this exhibit, so they'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Here's Abigail giving a tour. Here's Alejandro giving a tour. Here's Caitlin and Daniel ready to give a tour. And you'll see them in the hallway when we exit here in 5 minutes. Me and my team. Okay, before we go into the gallery, I want to show you a quick film, and it's the film is I think the films in this exhibit are something you should actually stop. Think of them as stations to orient you. We have 4 films total, and okay, so Dana's going to cue that up. It's 7 minutes. It speaks for itself, and then what we'll do is we'll go into the gallery, and then we'll come back for a Q&A.
I was born in Holbrook, which is out east on Long Island. I grew up in a really happy family with my parents and my brother. I was raised Jewish. We were always a part of a temple. I feel very connected to my past and to my history. I remember going to my grandfather and asking him lots of questions. As a Jewish person, it's hard not to feel connected some way to the past and what our families have gone through, whether directly or indirectly. I have always had a penchant for old things. From the time I was a little kid, people used to always tell me I had an old soul. And my mother and I would take out the old yellow book and we'd pull out the map and we would look for garage sales. And so that kind of started it for me. And it's always just been a passion I've always loved. I actually wasn't in the mood to go tag sailing on that particular day. I was tired and my husband said, no, we're in Belmore, let's just stop, there's this one sale. And I said, okay, I'll go in. And he stayed in the car with our daughter while I went inside. It was a big house, it was an older home, it hadn't been remodeled in a little while. Generally, the estate sales are conducted by professionals, so you don't know the reasons for why a homeowner is selling off their belongings. I made my way upstairs to the bedroom. There was a huge walk-in closet and nobody was up there, so I started to look around and there were a few things that caught my eye and I proceeded to throw them over my arm. And out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a very distinct pattern. It was a pale blue-gray and a beige stripe. When you see that stripe, it's the color of the blue, it's the color of the beige. It just instantly stops your breath. Like I just knew. I knew exactly what it was. So I added this jacket that was in a garment bag to my arm. I didn't really look at it very closely. I took it downstairs, I brought it to the proprietor of the sale. I said, how much? He said $10. I gave him a $10 bill for all the clothes I had, and I quickly walked out to the car. And I remember getting into my truck, my husband was sitting next to me, and he said, what's the matter? And I said, you have no idea what I have in my arms. So I opened it up, and that's when I noticed the rust-colored stains, the years of dirt, and a very distinct set of numbers. I didn't know that it had numbers on it. I just knew that it was a striped jacket. And then when I saw the numbers, it concreted it for me. I knew that it was a Holocaust jacket and it had to be real. The basic information I had was the address of the house. I knew the address of the house and I knew the numbers on the jacket. So the first thing I did was look to see if there were any databases that had numbers registered. I found that there was someone who wore the jacket registered to that number, Benzion Persetsky. He was a Lithuanian Jew who was sent to Kaufering and liberated in 1944. I then looked back to the home where I had initially bought the jacket, and I did some searches in the local records and found out that it was owned by a Ben and Chaya Perez. And I thought, Benzi John Peretsky and Ben Perez are very similar names, and full knowing that many people who came to this country after the war changed their names, I felt it was too much of a coincidence. I looked at findagrave.org to see if he was still living. So that was how I discovered that he had died in 1978. And that was how I started the research, and that's what I came to the museum with. I handed them all of my research and I said, this is what I've got. You know, there was an obvious excitement and then a sort of fear in the air that this was actually a Holocaust jacket, that this had gone through this horrific point of history and made it out to the other side. The owner of the jacket had several children and a wife that was still living, and they had no idea that the jacket existed, in part because their mother had Alzheimer's and possibly wasn't capable of mentioning it. Ben had passed away in 1978, and they were very young when he passed, and so I don't think he really ever had a chance to discuss his history and his past in World War II. Perhaps he didn't want to. Well, the fact that this jacket sat in that closet since 1978, no one talked about it, that also is pretty amazing. This jacket's history hits really close to home, not just because of my family's involvement with the Holocaust, but because of a much more modern tragedy. On September 11, 2001, my brother Joshua, who was 24 at the time, was killed in the attacks on the World Trade Center. I think it's very easy to hold on to photos and objects as a way to feel close to people who are no longer in our lives. For me, it's obviously very important to never forget, you know, the people who matter most to you. Even though it's been 15 years since his passing, I know that every time someone contacts me with a photo I'd never seen before, or told me a story about how he impacted their lives that I never had heard before, something in me just lights up, and those memories are so few and far between. I think it's human nature to hope and pray for those unforeseen moments where someone can give you another viewing of your family member, of your loved one. I so badly want that for myself, so I'm really grateful to be able to do that for the Perez family. I definitely believe in destiny. I think I was meant to be in that house. I was definitely meant to find that jacket. The word for it is beshert, and so I am a firm believer in beshert. I think that everything happens for a reason, whether you can explain it in the moment or not. My brother is definitely always with me. Everything I do to make him proud. And I think that he'll be very proud of what has come of this very interesting find. We are all asked, regardless of your religion, to do good deeds. And in Hebrew, it's tikkun alam, which means repair the world. And I think we all have an obligation to do something bigger than ourselves. And this is my ability to give back and do something great for somebody else.
Where are you, Jillian? Stand up for everybody. Also joining us, Lori Zullo, Ben Perez's daughter. And Michael Perez in the back. Michael Perez, Ben's son. Thank you all for sharing this with us, and so that everyone now can see the story of your family. So let's get some refreshments, go in the gallery for 20 minutes, and we can come back and have a quick Q&A and discussion, okay? We have Lori Zullo, Ben Perez's daughter, and Michael Perez are here if you have questions for them. We also have Jillian Eisman, who discovered the jacket, so feel free if you have a question for them They would be happy to answer. Just raise your hand if you have a question, and Daniel will come to you.
Was this jacket made professionally? Because the stripes line up so perfectly. Was this a professional company there?
Go ahead. There were several manufacturing sites for jackets during the Holocaust. Dachau was one of them. And so, although we're not sure how or who made these jackets,
They were made by the Jewish prisoners. They might have been professional tailors, but they were made in the camp.
Prior experience as a tailor, seams person, they were. And if one thing I noticed when handling the jacket is how well it's made. I mean, the fact that it's in the condition it's in after 75 years is a testament to. But you can see the quality of the stitching. There's a little metal clasp on the neck. There's even a loop in the back to hang.
Unfortunately, they were made
A
to
small-
last a long time.
Unfortunately, we're made to last a long time. Yeah.
Yes. Is it Miss Zulo who bought it?
No,
Miss Jillian
Oh,
Eisman.
you bought it. Okay. I'll say right in front. What do I need the microphone for? How did you know, what knowledge did you have in your background that this was a concentration camp jacket? I didn't hear it.
I have absolutely no.
There you go. Now, there we go.
I have no experience with Holocaust memorabilia, if you want to call it that. I don't know. Call it an instinct. I saw it and I knew what it was. I've seen Schindler's List. I've seen The Boy in the Striped Pajama. I've seen the shows and the pictures and all the documentaries, and you just know it was in a plastic bag, a dry cleaner bag, as if he wanted to make sure that it really was safe. And I just felt it. I mean, it was a presence. Yeah, God was with me. Yes, for sure.
It seems strange that he could take the tech jacket with him, because my father was in Dachau, and before he left, he had to leave the uniform behind. So I wonder, how was he managed to take the jacket with him?
Right. So one of the things we discussed was that your father was in Dachau in 1938 after Kristallnacht.
Yes.
He was there in 1944 when he was in the camp until it was liberated. So it wasn't the same thing. He was never released from Dachau while it was a camp. He was released by liberating troops. Now, that being said, most concentration camp uniforms weren't able to be taken out of the camps because they were destroyed by the authorities of the camp because they could contain lice or other disease. And very few of these uniforms exist for that and a variety of other reasons. We had the chief archivist of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum here a couple weeks ago who said that they don't have something like this in their collection. But he also said that he's sure other ones like this do exist in closets all across this country and the world, and that their biggest fear as an institution is that the families won't know what it is when the survivors have passed away, and that these things might end up no one knows where, but not in the institutions that could preserve them. So this was shared for us as well, certainly.
It sounds like that was a factory to make clothing, not individuals. Did they ever make uniforms for the German army also?
No. What do I want to say?
Manufacturing.
Yeah, this manufacturing site was just making prisoner uniforms, not just for Dachau, but for other camps as well.
But Kaufman's main purpose was munitions production, where Ben was. So he was on the munitions forced labor.
Other questions? Yes. Do you want to?
It's crazy that it was found on July 4th, on Independence Day. We can't even go.
Crazy. Oh, we should just do one more sale. Why not? I waited in the car. Oh, yes.
I'm just surprised what good condition it is in.
I expected to see the fabric worn out, the seams worn out, but everything looks perfect. It's sort of, I don't understand that.
He was. Let's see. He arrived August 1944, and liberated April 1945. That's 8 or 9 months. Also, a lot of times at Dachau, and you see in Kaufering, you see in the images in the gallery, there were under jackets, over jackets. We don't know if that was the only article of clothing he had, but he was there for about 9 months. He did have it dry cleaned, and then we already discussed the quality with which his fellow prisoners made it with. There was almost a care, I think, knowing the prisoners, knowing that whom they were making it for.
But there's more than that. Let me supplement just a little bit to say that this was a winter coat, so even though Ben arrived in August, it would not likely have been issued to him in August. Not every camp gave multiple layers of clothing, but as this camp at Kaufering was making munitions, so a critical service for the German military, they were treated differently. Secondly, their forced labor detail was 20 feet underground in concrete reinforced bunkers, which is where they were building these bombs. So this wasn't, as opposed to other concentration camp clothing, exposed to the elements. They were working in enclosed spaces. And like Cary already said, he wasn't wearing it for that long. But I think the even more important thing, potentially to note, is the care Ben took to preserve this jacket. That cannot be understated enough. Now, first of all, being in the back of a closet for 40 years is probably the best thing for preservation of an article of clothing, especially if there was central air, I don't know. But in the pitch dark, except for a light turning on once in a while, is great preservation environment. But it's important to know that after he was liberated, he was in a displaced persons camp for 4 years. And then he moved to New York, and he lived in at least 4 or 5 places. And each time he took immense care. And that's why I say that he was the first archivist of his life, because he took care of this like it was for posterity.
One thing should be noted about the condition of the coat also, that if you notice, it's 2 things. One is we made sure we paid a little extra, but that is now behind UV protected glass, so the light will not damage it. Second, the beige stripes are actually not the original color. It was gray and blue. And when you lift up the collar in the back, it's gray. It's perfectly gray. So the oxidization of the gray turned it, and the wear and the time did turn the gray to beige from what you see. But just know that under the collar, it's in its pristine state. It's still gray.
And I just want to also mention, on display, the jacket is closed. You can't see what's on the inside of it. And it's actually really amazing. They were so intuitive and resourceful. These prisoners, these people who had been taken from their homes, they actually had cut up, in many instances, bed linens, and they sewed secret pockets on the inside. And in this jacket, there is one. And it's a different striped fabric, one of those ticking stripes. And it just... You can see this thing from the outside. Yeah, you can see it from the outside, but it just on the inside, it's so amazing.
Daniel?
I have been a docent at the Batteries Holocaust Museum since it opened. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but we have trousers. I'm not sure if they're from Dachau, but to the best of my recollection, they look like the same pattern as your jacket. So I thought that was interesting.
It wouldn't be surprising that whatever articles we do have from the camps would have come from Dachau or another American GI-liberated concentration camp. But Dachau was the largest in terms of the number of prisoners, so it wouldn't be all that surprising if that were true. Yes.
This is a remarkable exhibit. Remarkable. It's outstanding. It's outstanding exhibit. And I'm wondering, is this exhibit going to be traveling, or is it going to be moving on to another area? I have another question also.
Okay, I'll hand it back to you. We have not yet decided if it's going to be traveling. It was designed so that it could, and that case was purchased with a 50-year imagination on the life of this exhibit, but we haven't made that decision. First of all, we just don't know if, I can take authority for this. I am not sure I am comfortable sending that jacket anywhere by any means. But it's likely that it would probably be seen other places within a day's drive, because it would be me behind the wheel.
You can also...
One more. I know that you have a wonderful audience, a wonderful population here of students to come. How about children? What's being done to bringing children here? Because I can tell you, to be honest with you, this is like a secret. This Holocaust museum, not many people know about it, and I think it needs to be publicized more.
Thank you. So first of all, I take your criticism well, because it's my job to make sure more people know about it, and I haven't done a good enough job. So that's the first thing. I absolutely agree with you that more people need to know about it, but I also feel like now, thanks to Cary Lane, there is not a single person that could not come here and get an amazing and incredible experience out of being here. Now we have something that is of universal significance. And now is the time that we need you to tell 25 people what you've seen and bring them in here, because it is truly a remarkable thing. And I say it as someone, Cary couldn't say it, but I can say it. It's a remarkable resource. We're immensely proud of it. And like I said, we feel like this is a turning point moment. Now, to the point of children, again, I'm using royal we. I am of several minds on the value and the ethical approach to how you teach young people the Holocaust and at what age you start. That being said, I think this exhibit is a great one that can be seen by all ages. There's not a lot in here that is inappropriate, I don't think. And I didn't mention this earlier, but we recently received a wonderful gift from one of our long-standing supporters who's been here almost since the beginning of this Holocaust Center, Sandy Delson, who's sitting now in the back, was in the front earlier, who gave us money, and this is important, who gave us money to develop our first, well, I hear we had one at one point of a different size, to develop our first docent and volunteer educator cohort here. I know you said you volunteered at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. There are volunteers at other museums. We've never had it. And the entire staff of this center is 2 full-time people and 2 part-time people. So we've never had the capacity. We see about 2,000 students a year from this campus, and we've never had the capacity to see many more students from outside of this campus. But with this new program, and assuming that you also talk to your retired friends, especially any former teachers, we're especially keen, people who know how to teach, to be our first cohort of volunteers, because we're very keen to be able to open the center up to more and more groups and people visiting. So thank you for that comment.
Dan, you might want to mention the website, maybe?
The other thing to mention is that this exhibit was put together with support from a very wonderful local corporation, a Fortune 500 company named Henry Schein, Inc., dental suppliers, and they came to us and they said exactly what you said. Not enough people know about it. And they said, you know, who's your audience? And I said, you know, Queens and Long Island. And they said, no, you don't have enough imagination. They said, it's a global audience. You're producing content that people could be interested in and aren't creating on their own around the world. And so their support for this exhibit in the center was to help us build an online presence. And this exhibit is going to be the very first exhibit in our history that is going to exist online at the same time as it's existing in person. And it's not just like text from the exhibit is going to be online. It's going to be an immersive, and it'll have features that you don't have here. And what I'm especially excited about is at the end, the computers where you can reflect on the exhibit. People who reflect here, that those comments go onto the new website, and so that people online, wherever they are, can comment back, and there can be conversation between students and others sitting here in our center and the global community. So that's going to be going online in January, and that will stay up in perpetuity. And this exhibit is up until at least June. And so, yeah, there are other opportunities. I just want to see, I see a few hands that have asked questions already.
Recently, I saw something on Channel 13 about the Holocaust Museum on the island. Perhaps if you contacted them, they might be interested and you'd get a larger audience, or they tape something for you.
Thank you. Well, yes, so this is being taped. We have spoken, there's a Holocaust Center in Glen Cove. That's the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County. Yes, and so we have spoken to them, and we've been in partnership with them on many occasions in the past. It's possible that this exhibit would go there. In fact, one of their board members has very recently given us an additional gift, having seen this exhibit. And I think when I speak to him, I'm going to find out what he has in mind is exactly what you have in mind. So, yes, please.
We were at the Holocaust Center in Glen Cove. We live in Queens, 15 minutes from here, have never been here. It was phenomenal. It was unbelievable. Just by chance, we had given a donation because a member of our temple's father, who was a Holocaust survivor, passed away. And I asked, where would you like a donation? He said to be given to this center. And we got a program in the mail, and that's how we got here. And it was unbelievable. Thank you. I just want to ask one question. How long did you have that jacket before you decided what you wanted to do with it?
Hand the mic.
I had the jacket for probably a week. It was in our home, and I couldn't have it there. It made me feel very sad, and so I was very lucky. Again, everything, Bashert, things happen for a reason. You're in the right place at the right time. So Marissa, Hollywood, and I am a resident of Long Island, so I know about the Glen Cove Museum. I've been to it in elementary school, they take you. But I had Marissa here, and I knew she would be the first person that I would want to reach out to. So opposed to going to someone I didn't know in Glen Cove, I came here, and it just snowballed. So it was only with me for a very short amount of time. And the minute I walked in, and I met Dr. Lesham, and I sat with Marissa, and I could see how excited they were about it, and how they didn't have something like that here. I knew it was the right decision to just instantly hand it over to them, and you did a really good job. It's really beautiful, and I'm so blessed to have gotten to meet Lori and her brother Michael, whom I never got a chance to meet when all this happened. So it's beautiful for everybody.
Thank you so much. One of the other things I want to mention, we're almost out of time. We might have time for just one more comment. We do have another comment.
You want to come up here? Come on.
This is Lori and Michael Zulo, Lori Zulo and Michael Perez, the children of Ben Perez.
First of all, I'd like to say that I had absolutely nothing planned to say.
We didn't
but
ask them if they came.
I do want to especially thank Dan and Cary for doing an incredible job, way beyond my expectations. And my hero is Jill. None of this would have come to be if not for her. The odds of it, this jacket that I did not know about, my brother did not know about, I don't think. The odds of it winding up in the right hands and for her to know what to do with it. And I am not really a very religious person, but the things that came together were almost unbelievable that made this happen. So I'm forever grateful. And I'd also like to say that there were a lot of conflicts, at least with me, as to how much to share of my father's private documents, which goes along with the question of why did he keep this jacket, which I've grappled with. And knowing my father, mostly from the perspective of a 13-year-old girl, that being the age at which he passed away. And I think anyone who did know him would describe him as very gentle, kind, reserved, loving, optimistic. I never saw a bitter bone in his body. I don't think I ever even saw him get angry. So he was a private person. He never discussed anything about the Holocaust, although we knew that he had been in the Holocaust with my grandmother who lived with us. But he did not discuss one story. He did tell my mother a few little stories, but even her, he did not. He put it behind him and really went on with his life and was very forward-looking. So the question of why he saved it, being such a private person, to me is a bit of a conflict of, he's private. He had a lot of time where he could have donated. He knew about the Holocaust Museum was in existence. They had Holocaust information. He could have donated at any time this jacket to a museum. So I don't think I'll ever really know why he saved it, but I think that one part of it, because at the moment when he was liberated, I think an initial reaction, at least for me, would be like, get this thing off of me. I never want to see it again. This is a horrible thing to want to remember or keep. But then I think about what happened to him, and a very traumatic thing that happened to him was that when he was 14 or so, his older brother, Levi, was in front of him, beaten almost to death by guards, and then later my father found out that he was taken out and just shot at an early age of 19. And I think that that very much traumatized him, though he never talked about it. And I think that perhaps in taking the jacket, it may have been some type of in memoriam to his brother. That's just because I don't know if at the moment he was thinking this is a piece of history. That may have come later. But I think perhaps initially he wanted to maybe make sure that everybody knew that this had happened and this was something important, that something not to be thrown out. But I will never truly know the reason, but I am glad that he did keep it, and throughout our childhood, he was a man of education who we lived in an environment where education was important in the household, not directly as preachers or lectures, but it was just a given that education was something to strive for. And that's why, in particular, I think it ended up in the exact right location, because this is not only an exhibition, but a place of learning and teaching. And I think that, to me, makes me overall feel that it was the right decision to share all those and some very private documents, and him being a private person, but the fact that this is an educational institute, he will live on, and his name will live on in his memory.
I guess I want to ditto that. My sister said, we're extremely grateful for everyone that's done all the work, starting from Julie to Dr. Lesham and Corey. Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry. Just the amazing work and resources that went into this. I'm sure it all happened, as we talked about, shared. Things are happening at this time when people can actually appreciate it, when Dan is here at the center, just then when everyone can come together at the right time, and this can be perpetuated for future generations. They can then, I guess, use the center to educate themselves. So again, thanks everyone for coming today, and thank God that everything is now coming together at the right time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you too so much. Thank you. Thank you. Before you go, Marissa, the assistant director, is right over there. If anyone wants to become a member or renew their membership to help support this exhibit and others like it, talk to Marissa. And thank you so much for coming today. And Cary?
I just want to thank you for your interest and all the kind things you've been saying. This was a labor of love. And just seeing Ben's children here and Jillian, and it just made it all worthwhile, and I know the students who work with us feel the same way, so thank you for your support.